Jerusalem Dateline. Many wonder how the battle against ISIS is going. We talk with Middle East expert Jonathan Spire, who just came back from the front lines of the war. He gave us a report that's a combination of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Jonathan Spire, great to see you again here on Jerusalem Dateline, and glad you're back safely from Syria and in Iraq.
Thank you very much, Chris. Nice to be here.
Can you tell us what your experiences was there in Syria just a few weeks ago?
Yeah, well, we were really there to try to research a new military alliance called Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the alliance which is currently allied with United States air power in the fight against Islamic State.
So how would you describe the state of the Islamic State right now inside Syria?
Well, the Islamic State is certainly, still in existence and is nowhere close to being destroyed. Having said that, it is no longer expanding. ISIS have a central slogan, which is Baqiya wa tatamaddad in Arabic, which means remaining and expanding. As of now, I would say the Islamic State is remaining, but it's not only no longer expanding, but it is in fact contracting. ISIS have lost a town called Al-Hawl, which enabled the SDF guys to cut Highway 47 between Raqqa and Mosul. They just lost the Tishreen Bridge across the Euphrates River. It sounds like a small detail, but it's important because it was the last bridge across that river that ISIS controls, which means if they wanted to bring forces quickly from further west, from Aleppo province to Raqqa city to defend it, it would now take them about twice or 2.5 times as long as it took them before they lost that bridge in December 27th. So the sense is, they're losing ground. In terms of their internal arrangements of the Islamic State, still pretty much intact. ISIS rules with an iron hand in those areas. All chance of dissent, is immediately punished in the most brutal of ways. So there's no sense of ISIS facing a challenge from within anytime soon. But at the same time, fewer foreign volunteers. The flow of foreign volunteers is still coming, but much less than before, considerably less than before. There's a shortage of money. They just reduced the salaries given to fighters, was an indication of that. They, in November, announced an amnesty for ISIS fighters who had deserted. Again, an indication, we think, of a shortage of manpower there for ISIS. So generally the trend lines are not good, but it doesn't mean that ISIS is anywhere close to disappearing anytime soon, but it is weakening.
So they're retreating, they're contracting, but do they still represent a danger to the region and to the West?
Well, I think they do, because what's happening is that, in a similar way with Al-Qaeda actually, is that as they lose their territorial holdings, so the focus begins to be more on going into the business of international terrorism. And we can trace that in 2015. If we think of 2014 as being the great period of expansion for ISIS in Iraq and Syria, then they were very busy, expanding on the ground in those countries. But in 2015, when the general trend has been toward contraction, so we've also witnessed the emergence of ISIS as a threat on a global terror level. First of all in the bombings in Suruc, and then in Ankara in Turkey. Then of course the taking down of the Russian jet over Sinai in October, and of course also the terror attacks in Paris in November. So the sense is, as ISIS loses ground, so it has to maintain somehow that sense of momentum on which it depends both for recruitment and for financial contributions. And the way that it's doing that is by going into the business of international terrorism. This is firstly. Secondly, we shouldn't forget that ISIS is a franchise organization. There are branches, or provinces as they like to call them, of the Islamic State elsewhere, not territorially linked to the mothership, so to speak, in Iraq and Syria. And here we do still see continued advancement. The ISIS holding around Sirte in Libya, of increasing importance. ISIS has a province in northern Sinai engaged in insurgency against Egyptian forces there. ISIS has an additional branch in southwest Syria, adjoining the border with the Israeli Golan Heights. So again, international terrorism and also the support for franchises. In this respect, the curve line is still in the upwards direction from the Islamic State's point of view.
Well, Jonathan, thanks for your expertise and your experience here and giving us some insight into what's happening here.
Thanks very much, Chris.